to the Free Kick Podcast. My name is Todd, and our house in the middle of DC, our house. Man, the Philadelphia Union just making themselves at home once again down in the nation's capital, beating DC United by a score of 3-1. What a fantastic atmosphere. What a great traveling group of fans by the Sons of Ben at Aldi Field. And I am like living on cloud nine, just trying to relive yesterday's atmosphere in my mind. And we'll talk about that atmosphere here in a second before we talk about this game. But man, I'll be honest with you guys. I'm so happy that the League's Cup's done. You guys know this. We're back to our regular programming. We'll talk about news, not this episode, but we'll review, obviously, the game. We'll do 3 stars. Didn't do any 3 keys to the game for this episode because we didn't have a guest, which we will have a guest. The guest that I was originally trying to get on to the podcast to preview this game, he ran into some flight issues coming back from Cincinnati, so we couldn't schedule a match preview episode for DC United. But Cincinnati, keep your eyes for that. I'll let you guys guess who that could be. And it is not Tom Glariter. So I'll let you guys try to guess who's coming onto the podcast for majority of you who I didn't tell that I booked that guest. So we'll see if you guys can figure that out, who's coming on the podcast here in a couple weeks. But we'll get to what else? No blunder of the week. I mean, there were a lot of blunder of the week opportunities the last couple of weeks, but because during the League's Cup, I didn't want to make those episodes follow the same format as MLS Cup games. So we didn't do blunder of the week, but trust me, once we get a good candidate, we're definitely bringing that back. And I need to get a soundbite for the blunder of the week. Because if you guys are OG listeners of the podcast, and I'm talking not even when we started talking Philadelphia Union, but when I was talking English Premier League, Champions League, we were doing blunder of the week back then too. And the soundbite I would always play was the oof sound from Roblox. So I think we have a good soundbite to use going forward because I really want to bring something back as a soundbite when we're talking about not so good moments. So I might have just a soundbite for you guys. But let me go ahead and talk about the experience down in DC. That was my 20th Philadelphia Union game this season. I've been to 20 out of the 34 possible Philadelphia Union games. I'm not going to lie to you guys. I'm really tired, but I don't take these moments for granted. My 3rd away game of the season, DC, Colorado, and New York Red Bulls will probably be my last away game of the season. Don't feel like traveling up to New England. Was supposed to travel to Columbus until I found out that's when I'm coming back from vacation, and I didn't feel like trying to schedule layovers to get me to Columbus. And so I'm not going to travel out there and see Loa.com, I believe the name of the stadium is. One day we'll get out to Columbus, one day. But man, it's been a joy just to be at so many Philadelphia Union games this season, especially somebody that doesn't get paid to cover this team, because I would love to get paid. I'm not going to lie. I mean, I think you guys can figure that out. And I think that goes for all of us freelancers. We would all love to get paid. But the fact of the matter is, majority of the people, not just that cover the Union, but in MLS, don't get paid doing this, covering the league, covering their specific teams. There's very few opportunities for people to make this into a career. Now, sure, you can go out and try to get a whole bunch of different sponsorships and everything and live off of sponsorship money, but I think I would want to have something a little bit more stable than that. But look, I know I'm very fortunate being able to work out my work schedule and get to as many games as possible. And I don't take that for granted. And I went down to the game to DC with Skylar Hoffner, Philly Union Nation, and I went down with Jose Nunez as well from across the pitch. Both of those guys are freelancers doing fantastic work. You guys have heard them on this podcast the last couple of weeks. And if you guys aren't following them, be sure to follow them. I mean, I feel like we tagged each other on Twitter 20,000 times yesterday and today. We're recording this podcast on Sunday, so that's why I said today. But they do fantastic work, and I think it's very important that you support local journalism because we try to give you guys the best coverage. And, we might not get it right every single time, but I do think the Philadelphia Union media landscapes in a better spot with somebody like Jose Nunez and Skylar Hoffner, Greg Oldfield, Matt Ralph. Those guys are bringing fantastic coverage to the Union. And that's not their day jobs, but they do it for the love of the game because it's coverage every single one of you listening to this podcast deserve. And I'm going to continue giving you guys the best coverage, the coverage that you guys deserve as long as I can. And by the way, the goals breakdown videos are also back since MLS resumed. So be sure to check out the latest video, youtube.com/freekickpod. Got to plug that as always. Be sure to like and subscribe and share the video. One of my better videos, I would say. And there's a new feature called tracking that the software that I use, it's a German company that I use to analyze all these videos. And they finally added the feature I've been asking for the last couple months, tracking. So you guys got to check out those videos. They are fantastic in my opinion. But the one with DC United Philadelphia Union, that's the best one. But yeah, so fantastic time with Skylar and Jose down in DC. Had those guys meet me at my house. We drove down and just, chatting just about life, music, Philadelphia Union, whatever we could chat about. Really great guys. And I'm proud to call them friends. And meeting so many people in the Philadelphia Union fan base. I mean, there are so many people that I talked to yesterday down in DC, and I would name you guys all, and you guys probably all do deserve a shout out, but there's probably like 20 of you guys that I talked to before the game. And I mean, we're already 9 minutes into this podcast, and some of you guys are probably like, get to the game already. So I'm not going to shout out all 20 people. But yeah, it was nice just interacting with Union fans, seeing how many people travel down to DC. So loud, right from the get go. Not even during warm-ups, but walking into the stadium, making their presence felt. I posted that video on Instagram and Twitter for people that haven't seen it. And I love this fan base. I really, really, really love this fan base. It's so special. And I've talked about this in the past on the podcast. I saw it in Colorado. Obviously, you see it in New Jersey because Philadelphia to Jersey is not that far away. But man, when the Union are winning, when they're as good as they are, these fans will travel out and support this team. And I expect a good crowd to go down to Charlotte. Will we have a good crowd going up to Toronto on a Wednesday? Maybe more than we typically have. I think if this game was on a Saturday, then we would see a lot more Union fans up there. Talked to some Union fans that said that they've traveled up to Montreal this season. Well done to them. But the traveling support for this team the last couple of years has been fantastic. And it's going to continue. with the Union continue getting results. And that's a huge result down in DC because we've talked about it on this podcast too. The Union not winning a ton of games on the road, get the fifth win last night against DC. Couple more results on the road, and this team could really be putting the pressure on Cincinnati for first place in the Eastern Conference and really pushing to get a Supporters Shield standing. And that starts with you guys, the fans, whether that be at home or on the road, just bringing the noise and the energy and pushing this team on. So, great environment down in DC. Great seeing my guy Nico, one of the three people in charge of PR for the Philadelphia Union. Nice to see Nico finally travel out on the road. First time he sat down at Aldi Field. Love that guy. One of the best in the business. Brian Ruiz, PR guy from DC United. Great to finally meet him after speaking a couple times last season through email, just trying to get guests onto the podcast. So it was finally nice to introduce myself and meet him and get credentialed for this match by DC United. So overall, a really great weekend, and you top it off with a victory by the Union. Does not get any better than that. But let's go ahead and talk about the game now, 12 minutes into the podcast. And this is the exact start that the Union would have wanted to start the second half of the MLS season. Two quick goals coming at DC United right away. You couldn't have asked for a better start to the second half of MLS and the start of this game. This is just typical 2022 Philadelphia Union. Mikael Uhre adds his second goal in 2 games in all competitions. The Union, you felt the intensity was there from the first moment in this game. Mikael Uhre, too, by the way, has played 90 minutes in his last 2 starts. And I got to give a shout out to Dave Miller for when he was on this podcast. He actually mentioned and said that he believes it's not a fitness issue with Mikael. That's not why he believed we always see Mikael come out around the 60, 65th minute. But he believes that that's because Jim Curtin wasn't giving him enough time to really make impact into the games. And I asked Mikael after the game, I said, that's consecutive 90 minutes that you've played. How you feeling? Like, it was really humid down in DC. We haven't seen you play 90 minutes consecutively often. And you've now done it 2 times in a row. And he said, it feels good. But not only that, he believes that the front three of him, Carranza, and Gonzaga are really starting to click. And now this has potential to be very scary for the rest of MLS. And if these front 3 players can start to consistently score heading into playoffs, why can't the Union push for first place in the Eastern Conference? Why can't they push for first place in the Supporters Shield standings? You have New England losing to Montreal last night by a score of 1-0. Huge result there for the Union, meaning the Union are now in second place in the East, tied with New England on 43 points. Cincinnati gets a win last night, which doesn't help the Union. But you have a game in hand against Cincinnati. You still play Cincinnati. And even though they have an 11-point lead on you, if you win that game in hand and if you beat Cincinnati, now Cincinnati are only 5 points in first place. And anything can happen. Looking at Cincinnati's schedule the rest of the season, they're away this Wednesday to Atlanta. Atlanta just destroyed Nashville and Mercedes-Benz Stadium by a score of 4-0. Then they have Orlando City at home. Then they play Philadelphia Union away on September 16th. Then they go up to Montreal, September 20th, play Charlotte, go away to Toronto, play New York Red Bulls, go down to Miami, and then they end the season playing Atlanta United at home. So yeah, it's possible that there's a couple games there that Cincinnati could drop, and if the Union continue to click, if Mikael Uhre is right that the front three are starting to click, that they feel the same thing they felt last season between the three of them. Those guys are good enough to carry the Union into first place to win the Supporters Shield standings. And I know the Union can only control what they control. But if they continue to get results, if they continue to win, would you guys be happy? Let's say Cincinnati doesn't choke. Would you guys be happy with the Union finishing in second place in the Eastern Conference? And so the only time that they would play away on the road is in the first playoff games where it's best of three. So you have to go on the road. Then from there on out, it's whoever's the higher seed, they host a home game. So the Union, if they finish second, they could potentially have to play 2 road games before they get to MLS Cup final. Would you guys feel confident with this team going on the road? 5 wins now on the season on the road. Convincing result down in DC after DC United had your number in Leagues Cup and in the first game that you met in MLS. Both games ended in 0-0. Both games, the Union only had 5 shots on target. And you look, last night's game alone, the Union had 10 shots on target. So they doubled that in one game. It was clicking on all cylinders last night down in DC. And a big part of that is, for sure, the front three. And so do you guys feel confident? If the Union ended the season right now in second place in the Eastern Conference, can they go on the road and get results? It hasn't happened often this season. But if we're to believe Mikael Uhre that things are finally clicking between the front three, they've got to have a chance wherever they are, whether that be at Subaru Park or in the road, right? I mean, I believe they would. But let's not discard the fact that, okay, the front three are starting to click. You add the addition of Ty Barabo, and now that's even more firepower to this team. And I saw people asking on social media, why didn't Ty start this game? Why didn't Ty come in this game? And Jim Curtin essentially said that because this is basically week 2 of preseason for him, he's not fit enough to start those games, play long, meaningful minutes. And they didn't feel like this game, where the Union were absorbing a lot of pressure to close out this game, they didn't think it was the right decision to bring him on to close out this game, which is fair, right? I mean, we saw him for 5 seconds against Monterrey. What a waste of a debut, 5 seconds. But as Jim Curtin called it, a flawless debut. Did not make a single mistake. And Mikael Uhre was asked after the game, with a player like Ty coming in here, he was starting obviously in Austria. He's going to want to play meaningful minutes. So how is Mikael specifically helping him acclimate to Philadelphia, to MLS, and to the Union?
It's all of our guys' jobs to make sure that new guys are welcome because, again, we're a team. I know that we're competitors up top, but if we can make each other better for the team, that's what it's all about. And yeah, Ty's been coming in and been doing his thing in training, and hopefully we'll see him a bit more in game soon. But yeah, I think he's going to be a good addition for us.
And the last thing you just said, I think he's going to be a good addition for us. That's fantastic to hear. Because, yes, we haven't seen Ty as much as we have wanted to because of visa issues and whatnot. Of course, that's so Union. But these players are around him every single day in training. And if Mikael's saying, yeah, I'm liking what I'm seeing in training, he's going to help this team push for a high seed in the playoffs. He's going to help us push in the playoffs. That's exactly what you want to hear. The Union finally go out there and get a difference maker. And I do mean a real difference maker for the bench. Because you look at the the starting lineup last night for the Union, that was probably the strongest 11 the Union have right now. That's the lineup I hope to see majority of the rest of the season because that bench looked good. Alabadori has been in fantastic form. 2 goals off the bench his previous 2 games. Joaquin Torres, okay, hasn't been the greatest player this season, but having an option like him on the bench definitely helps. Having a player like Ty 100% helps. Having a player like Leon Flock come in and play a fantastic game as the lone six, a position that he says all the time that, that's not his preferred position. He would rather be in a double pivot, but he comes in and plays fantastically for Jose Martinez, who had to exit this game because of injury. And by the way, Jim Curtin said that he felt his hamstring tighten up on that long run where he got the assist, and Jose didn't want to push it, so he came out. And Jim won't speculate, but he hopes that he'll be back for Red Bull. Doesn't think the injury is too serious. Jose said on social media that he's fine, so I would expect the Union probably hold him out for Toronto, and then, as Jim said, hopefully be back for Red Bull. But remember too, that same thing happened to Jose Martinez last year. I want to say it was a game against Orlando City where Jose's running down the right touch line, going towards the Sons of Ben, and he pulls up, feels his hamstring. So I don't know. Maybe Jose Martinez should not go on those runs anymore. But that dude's got great speed, great dribbling, great vision, and maybe we should see the Union start to have interchange between the two eights and their six. Have them just constantly switch out in between different moments in the game and add confusion to the opposition. I think that could be a great tactical tweak for this team going down the final stretch, heading into the playoffs. And maybe that is something that Jim Curtin and this coaching staff has noticed and that they will experiment with because I think it can be a real weapon for this team. And so, yeah, it was great to see that Jim Curtin went with his best starting 11, has firepower now on the bench. And going back to what Mikael said, I mean, that the dude's so humble. Dude's a team player saying that, if he's helping the team, that's good for the team. It's not about individual players. And again, this has to go back to Ernst Tanner and Jim Curtin and knowing the players that they want to sign for this team. It's team first, individual second. You want players that are bought into the team. Having players that are all about the team and not themselves are going to lead this team to great things. And to see Mikael echo what's been preached for years, you'd love to hear it. And I do think the addition of Ty will push Mikael Uhre, will push Julian Carranza, will push Chris Donovan. Because let's face it, it's always been Donovan coming in for Uhre. And now you would assume it's probably going to be Ty coming in for Mikael more often than not. But maybe that's going to light a fire under Chris Donovan saying, hey, look, I don't want to lose any more minutes than what I already get. Now this guy's going to push my game to another level. And I know missed a great opportunity last night. It's not going to help his case. But having a player like Ty, I do think is going to help this team out tremendously. And maybe I'm putting a little bit too much pressure on this dude already. And I'm sure some of you guys are too, but he's going to be a fantastic addition. I feel it. When you look at the numbers, when you look at the underlying numbers on different websites, everything checks the box. And as always, you can't judge what he does in the last 10 games of the season, judge what he does next season. And even then, it might be too early to judge him. But there's so much high praise for this guy. And hopefully, he can make a difference for the Union this season when they need a player to light a fire under some players' butts. But I want to go back to the first two goals in this game. I know, kind of rambling all over the place so far in this episode. That's okay. If you guys have been listening to the podcast for a while, I think you guys have come to expect that by now. Don't have somebody to keep me on track. So I got to try to keep myself on track and not lose you guys. But the first two goals in this match, those were typical Philadelphia Union goals of the past. The first goal that you see, Union turn over DC United in their own half. Why DC United didn't just clear this ball instead of trying to be fancy and dribble by Daniel Gazdag, it's beyond me. But hey, maybe next time they won't try that. Derek Williams is the player I'm speaking of. Terrible defending, and I would like to think that I break that goal down pretty well in the goal breakdown video. So if you guys want to hear my thoughts on all those goals, again, check out that video. A lot more in depth than how I just explained that goal to you guys. But the three players of Gazdag, Carranza, and Uhre all connect for that goal. And then the second goal, we saw DC United have a free kick, and the Union hit him on the counterattack with Jose Martinez going on a fantastic run and Jack McGlynn finishing the play off. And we talked about the front three clicking. Mikael Uhre starting to feel them clicking. But we're also seeing different players on the Union contributing, where the Union's last 14 goals in MLS have been scored by 9 different players. And Jim Curtin gave his thoughts on that stat.
Yeah, it takes the burden off of them. I think last year you saw them kind of carry us in an extreme way. Our defense was extreme as well in terms of what we conceded. So that was a unique season. This year, we still are having a very good year. There's a little maybe regression in certain areas, but still we know we can beat anybody. So that's kind of the name of the game. But I think that, when that front three goes well, and we get contributions from a McGlynn, or Ali chips in with the goal, or Jesus Bueno gets a goal, or Jose scores one from deep, or a center back scores off of a restart. Those are things that are really important. And look, I said it to the guys. We lost last year. We lost home field advantage on a tiebreaker. So every point matters, every goal matters for the goals against tiebreaker, and every win matters. And that's really the way it has to be now these last 10 games. We want to start that playoff feel now rather than trying to flick a switch at the last 4 games of the year. It doesn't work that way. So we started, I think, the right way with this first game in our return to league play. Some results went our way, some didn't, and it's still really tight. So you guys see that as well.
Yeah, absolutely. Jim hit the nail right on the head, where it does take off the pressure from Daniel, Julian, and Mikael, where other players can chip in with goals. Saw it with Jack McGlynn. See it with Bedoya, like I mentioned, coming off the bench. Jesus Bueno, Jim talked about. Set piece goals are huge for this team. And so the more ways this team can get goals, it can only help this team going forward. And we're all feeling good right now after this DC United game. And will people be back to being negative if the Union don't get a result against Toronto? With that team imploding the way that they're going right now, 3 points is definitely possible. And the Union do typically play well on Wednesday night games. But, it is an away game, and I'm a little bit weary about trusting this team this season on the road than I was last season, where they went 7-5-5. 5 wins this season, 6 losses and 2 draws. I believe the record is this season on the road. So, I mean, they do win games on the road. One on the road down in DC. So I don't know. Maybe they do get 3 points. in Toronto on Wednesday. But it is nice. It is nice to see other players step up, score goals, where that really wasn't the case last season. It was the front three getting all the goals. And if more and more players can chip in, that means the opposition's now going to have to focus on those players instead of putting all their attention on the front three, which then leaves the front three in a lot of 1v1 situations. And that's when the blowouts start happening. So don't be surprised. The last couple games of the season, if you see some 4-5-0 results by the Union, because the more other players contribute in the goal department, the more things are going to open up. And if the Union continue to score as early as they did against DC United the first 5 minutes in this game, the first 15 minutes in this game, teams aren't going to sit back. Teams are going to have to come at the Union. And that's when the counterattacks start happening for the Union. Now, yes, you want this team to have a couple more clean sheets. It's disappointing that they gave up a clean sheet in this game. DC United had a couple good opportunities in this game where they should have scored. Not probably, they should have scored. Durkin had a fantastic opportunity in the first half after Wagner gets called ball watching. He misses wide. Pirani had an opportunity after Benteke flicked the ball onto him. But Kai Wagner does a good job after setting up this opportunity for DC United. Wagner recovers and forces Pirani to go a little bit wide instead of running straight 1v1 against Andre Blake. And then the Ted DiPietro goal, that was class. That was tired legs. Nobody on the Union followed the run, and that's disappointing to see. The Union should have kept a clean sheet in this game. Andre Blake had a fantastic save on Benteke's header. That's a world-class save. And I don't want to call out Joe Laurie from Backfield. Maybe that should have been blunder of the week, so I apologize. But he said that Petrovic is the greatest goalkeeper in MLS history. And that's just not true. It's not true at all. How can you say a player that's been here, a year, is the greatest player? Come on, Joe. You know better than that. I mean, probably wanted it for clickbaits, wanted the engagement on social media. But you cannot tell me that a player that's only been in MLS for 1 year, that's not playing consistently with his national team, is the best player ever to play in MLS at the goalkeeper position. Because let's be honest, would anybody be shocked if he doesn't consistently play at Chelsea? I wouldn't. I mean, look at all the players that Chelsea have bought within the last year. What's it been? Something like 15, 16? They've spent close to $1 billion. They're just spending money for the sake of it. So, yeah, I don't know if the move from New England to Chelsea is the right one for Petrovic, but I do know that he is not the greatest goalkeeper in MLS history. Andre Blake definitely deserves a spot in that conversation, 3-time goalkeeper of the year. And that save that Andre Blake had on Benteke, a powerful header, fantastic save, followed up by Andre Blake. Jakob Glesnes, excellent blocking, 2 goals off the line. More on him a little bit later. So a lot of great moments in this game by the Union. A lot of missed opportunities by DC United. And there were also missed opportunities in this game by the Union where they messed up a couple of 4v3s, 3v2s, where they really could have started piling on the goals like we saw last year. You had in the first half, Daniel Gazdag plays the ball late to Mikael Uhre. which if that ball could have been quicker, Mikael would have hit that first time. Uhre played a good ball, like I mentioned, into Donovan. Donovan's thinking too much about the pass to Gazdag instead of finishing the play himself. So when you're complaining about things like that in a game that you won 3-1, does it hold much weight that you miss those opportunities? Probably not. But as you guys just heard Jim Curtin say, the Union want to score as many goals as possible. So it doesn't come down to tiebreakers for when you're talking about playoff spots. You don't want to rely on the most ridiculous tiebreakers to determine playoff spots. So blowout teams, add on goals, always push, push, push. And this team's going to be fine. So that's pretty much all my thoughts from this game, everything that I wanted to bring up. So let's go ahead and talk about 3 stars of the game, and then we'll end this podcast. Number 3 on the evening, Daniel Gazdag. 1 goal, 2 chances created, 5 ball recoveries. I think he would have had an assist in this game if he would have played the ball quicker to Mikael Uhre. With the way that he's been playing the last 2 games, the way that he played in particular against DC United, he probably would have finished that playoff, especially against Tyler Miller, who had a shocker of a game, got substituted out at halftime, which is pretty embarrassing, I would say. Gives up a penalty that Daniel Gazdag converts, who, by the way, is now at 36 goals for the Union in the MLS regular season, which is now tied for CJ Sapong with second all time for the Union. 14 away from Sebastian Letou. It's getting closer and closer for Daniel Gazdag chasing that record, from tying that record, and I think eventually passing that record. 9 for 9 this season from the penalty spot, and Jim Curtin also talked about, some regression, and I'm sure without him saying names, part of that is Daniel Gazdag, where he's only had 1 goal from open play this season in the league. Julian Kranza is only at 10 goals with 10 games remaining. He adds a couple braces here and there. He can for sure be a 16, 18, maybe even 20 goal scorer. I mean, yes, it sounds crazy to say with 10 games left, but you add a hat trick, you add consistent braces, he could easily double 10 goals in the last 10 games of the season. And so Jim's right. He's not naive that this team isn't the same that they were last season, but they're still finding ways to win. So Daniel Gazdag, star number 3 on the evening. Number 2, Mikael Uhre, 1 goal, 2 out of 3 shots on target. His hold-up play in this game was fantastic. Again, just connecting with the midfielders like he did against Monterrey. 35 touches. He had 30 or 31 touches against Monterrey, I believe. And you get Mikael on the ball more than 8 to 10 touches a game. These are the type of performances you're going to see. I thought his movement off the ball was excellent. Stretching the field. Doing what the Union paid him to do. Score goals and link up well with your teammates. Played 90 minutes again. At times looked tired. But to his credit, when he needed to make those runs, he made those runs. And boy, I think this guy's starting to get hot at the right moment. And I would not be surprised if we see a brace sometimes very soon in the future for Mikael Uhre. And number 1 on the night, Jakob Glesnes. 8 passes into the final third, 4 out of 6 completed long balls, 2 shots cleared off the line, 4 blocks, 4 clearances, 3 interceptions, 5 ball recoveries. And I do think a big reason that DC United looked as bad as they did is because the Union did such a good job defending against Christian Benteke, whether that be Jakob Glesnes or Jack Elliott. And Jim Curtin mentioned this. I forget what game it was in the League's Cup, but I'm pretty sure it was Querétaro when he said not good, where he was talking about how both Julian and Mikael weren't great in that game, where they constantly lost the ball, and now the opposition's coming right down the Union's throat. And that's exactly what happened in this game between the Union and DC United. Benteke kept losing the ball. They really didn't have any offense in this game. And because of that, DC United are dealing with all sorts of pressure. And I don't think that's just a DC United thing. I don't think that's just a Philadelphia Union thing. That's a soccer thing, right? If your offense isn't holding up the ball, if they're not finding those outlet passes, if people aren't making good runs off the ball, you're going to have an unbelievable amount of pressure on your defense. And more times than not, you're going to break and the floodgates are going to start opening up. And I thought for a moment that was going to happen in this game against DC United. But going back to Jakob Glesnes, fantastic game by him, by the Union's defense in general, but Jacob in particular. And this is what Jim Curtin had to say about his performance.
Yeah, he had goal line clearances. He had big tackles. The play that he makes, where Marcos is actually one of the best refs in this league, and he knows. I think on that one he may be messed up, but that's okay. It happens. But on that play, that's literally like what you'd show a young center back defensively, right? Be aggressive, defend forward, win the first tackle, bounce up quickly, win the second tackle. Yes, they gave a yellow card. It was a mistake. But at the same time, those are the things that makes me proud. You know, I'm an old center back myself, not half as good as or talented as Jacob was. But those are great plays, and the blocks off the goal line that he makes, the clearances. So he's the defender of the year for a reason. And I thought tonight was excellent. And I wish you could rescind yellow cards because that one should be rescinded.
Yeah, absolutely. And I was going to ask Jim Curtin too after the game, with him being a former center back, does Jim believe that, he can pull off some of the stuff that Jacob Glesnes pulled off against DC United? And he answered that without me even having to ask that. So fantastic game by Jacob. You hope that this is a start of him finishing the season strong, because as much as the Union need the front three to click, the defense needs to be as strong as they were last season. And obviously, that's not going to happen with already conceding 27 goals this season. The Union conceded 26 in all 34 games last year in the regular season. So the Union definitely aren't going to set any super record this year defensively. But if this team can just start clicking, and the DC United game is a great example of that, do not be surprised if the Union wind up winning the Eastern Conference. And, I am a little bit scared saying that because I can see it now, recording a future podcast episode complaining about how this team disappointed, how that type of performance isn't going to get this team far in the playoffs. And I do know that I recorded an episode saying, because of all the minutes played by the players on this team, it's not going to go far for them in the playoffs. And if I wind up being wrong, I'll eat that. You guys can give me crap on social media for that 100%. I will eat that. I will admit it and say, I was wrong. And I'm glad that the Union proved me wrong. So if the Union can build off of this performance against DC United, good things are going to happen for this team. Good things are going to happen, and you guys will be happy more times than not. But that is everything for this episode. There's going to be no preview episode for Toronto, with that game being on Wednesday. No preview for New York Red Bulls, because I do feel bad not giving people enough notice, enough time to come onto the podcast, where, I only give them one day to work with and only a limited amount of time And so it's not fair to ask those guys. So I'm not going to ask them to come on for this episode, but we'll definitely, like I said, have a person on for Cincinnati. And once the international break happens, maybe we'll get a guest or two. I have a couple people in mind, and we'll see if I can work something out with Union to get them onto the show. But if you guys aren't following on Twitter, Instagram, or Facebook, follow at Free Kick Pod. Wherever you get your podcasts, be sure to leave a review, follow so you're up to date every time I drop the episodes. And check out the YouTube page, youtube.com/freekickpod. Again, just subscribing to that page, sharing the videos, commenting. All of that stuff goes a long way. It reaches so many more people than you guys realize. And so if you guys can do that, and I hate sounding like I'm begging for follows and reviews, but I want to reach as many people as I can with this podcast. And I think there's a reason why so many of you guys keep coming back to this podcast every single week listening, because you guys enjoy what you hear. I guess you guys assume that I know what I'm talking about. I think I know a thing or two. I'm not the sharpest. There's a lot more brighter soccer minds out there. But I do take what I do serious, and I do think I make good points here and there. But until then, my name is Todd, and this is the Free Kick Podcast.